Your name's not down, you're not coming in.
Hello and welcome to Raw, the 90s Rave Podcast with me, your presenter, Tom Latcham. On Raw, we span the entire gamut of the 90s rave scene, including some of the originators of that sound. And today's guest not only helped kick off the 90s rave scene, but he transcended mainstream British society, albeit largely because of the distinctive dust mask that he became famous for. But he's not just famous for being 30 years ahead of the PPE rush. He's also behind some of the biggest bangers in rave history with Bizarre Inc., Nexus 21, and then Altern more famously, moving from acid house hero into early hardcore and beyond. It's the one and only, I should say, Mark Archer. How you doing, Mark?
I'm great, thank you.
Cheers for joining me, mate. Appreciate it. Of all the guests that we've featured so far, you are perhaps one of the 90s rave scene's originators, and that you were creating acid house in the late 80s. Do you feel like your work did help lead to the explosion of rave music that we saw in the 1990s?
I don't know whether I'd ever blow my own trumpet to say that we helped. I mean, we were there in various guises, working with Dean right at the very start when we were doing acid house. I mean, we went into the studio wanting to do acid and were cajoled into doing hip hop and bomb the bass kind of stuff. But I guess it's probably just because of the fact I'm older than most people that I was there at the start, really.
Well, we're going to come on to your music career in a bit, but I'd actually like to start a little bit differently this week, because you and your partner have been quite heavily involved in the We Are Viable campaign, which aims to pressure the government into supporting live music. I know that your partner's more heavily involved than you are, but you are doing stuff around it. And you've also lived through a previous time as well, where the government seemed to have it in for rave music. So I want to know what the last year, if you could paint a picture about what the last year has been like for you as someone who works in live music.
I mean, last year started off pretty well, to be honest. Everything was going swimmingly, and then there was mention of coronavirus. I think I actually did a post on the Altern page in January about it, because there was whispers about it, but no one thought it was going to do what it's done and affect the industry the way it has done. There was a few gigs where it was a bit weird. I mean, I went out to Madrid shortly before the lockdown in the UK, and it was a slight worry because it hit Madrid quite badly. And then we did the Bangface Weekender, which was the last party that was allowed to go ahead in this country. It had already started on the Thursday, and then I think the lockdown happened on the Saturday. So we were all up there. And Bangface is a bit of a weird party anyway. The vibe in there is completely off mad. The hook. Yeah, totally. And a lot of people were saying, when the real world is weirder than what's going on in Bangface, something's up. And then we came back from that, and it was just like a domino effect, watching my bookings for the rest of the year, one after another, after just folding. How did
you feel about
that? I mean, it's quite crushing watching your career slowly disappear, one after another, and you have no idea when there's going to be an end to it.
Terrifying, I would imagine.
Yeah, and it is my main source of income. It's what I do week in, week out. So all of a sudden you're left with what am I going to do? The government didn't think the industry was viable whatsoever. Told people to, pretty much like Thatcher did, get on your bike, go out and retrain, and start doing all these lovely little pictures of people from the entertainment industry retraining to go and do, oh, you didn't know you were going to be an accountant. Fantastic. Cheers for that.
So are you going to work in fibre now, Mark?
Luckily, when I left school, and after I did a YTS scheme, for those who remember YTS schemes and YOP schemes, I was a painter and decorator for a few years, just before I started making music in '88. Okay. So it's something I've been able to slightly fall back on just to help out. But obviously, you wouldn't be able to start up your own company and just get loads of work in straight away. You know, it's been a massive struggle.
Yeah, I'm sure a struggle for. I mean, it's a struggle for everybody, but in particular, anyone who's listening who's involved in that live music. And it's not just the artist, is it? There's a whole industry behind it, and that was, I think, was the basis for We Are Viable. The name, of course, comes off Rishi Sunak, the Chancellor, saying that musicians and art were not viable and they should retrain. Now, I don't know whether that was a. I like to feel like it was a bit of a slip of the tongue, but perhaps it did also coincidentally give an idea about how they did view the arts industry. How did you feel when you were told you're not viable?
Well, it's how can anyone who obviously they get paid a lot of money for going around not attending Parliament, sitting there and all that rubbish. They do very little for what they're paid for, and then they're telling people who bring so much joy that we're not viable. It just shows the massive them and us kind of divide that there is.
Well, I'm interested to know. So back in the early 90s, Alternate, who you are the act that you're most famous for, they felt like they were steeped in political connotations. And that was due to the way that the government was treating the rave community at the time, but not just the rave community, but they were treating the rave community as pariahs, really. Is that a reasonable assessment to say that?
It was. I mean, it was something that they couldn't control and wanted to control for some strange reason. But I guess it's always the way. Whenever there's a youth movement, the establishment try and squash it for fear of some kind of revolt. I mean, I think
we'd have learned over the years that kids can't even be bothered to vote. So I don't think that they're going to be revolting anytime soon.
Especially when you painted it in black and white for them. All we wanted to do is dance. But obviously dancing's something to be feared of by them.
How did you feel to have the government cracking down on raves back then, both you personally and collectively as a music scene?
You felt like you'd finally found this kind of escapism from everything that was going on in the 80s. It was pretty grim time. And then there was these parties where you could go to and just let off a bit of steam. And all of a sudden it was like, I can remember going up to Stoke to different acid parties, and you'd go to one week, next week it'd be closed. And then 2 weeks later, something else would start up, and you go to that one for a couple of weeks, and then that'd be closed. And you just like, give us a break. What is it that everyone's doing wrong? And what is the problem with this?
And how did you try to combat it, again, both personally and collectively as a scene? Well,
it drove it underground, because it started in the small clubs, and it obviously drove it to a point where, well, if we can't do this the proper way, there's going to be illegal raves happen, which they did up and down the country. Then, of course, things got quite heavy-handed with the police presence there. I mean, some police forces used common sense, and allowed things to go on if no trouble was being caused. The police turned up, and that caused the trouble. People, they just wanted to go somewhere and have a dance, and then the police turned up in riot vans, and it caused problems, which then that led to sensationalism in the newspapers.
I mean, it's obviously very different in terms of what's going on at the moment, because we are in the middle of a global pandemic. So that does bring its own difficulties as far as organising raves. I mean, you can't do it legally, certainly. But do you see any power? There have been an increase in illegal raves during this time, or certainly there appears to be. But actually, to be honest, it appears that there's been an increase in illegal raves over the last few years, full stop, underneath this Tory government. And do you see parallels with how the government behaved back in your heyday and with what's going on now?
Totally. I mean, if you'd have said to anyone, the political situation is going to be as bad as it is, there's going to be illegal raves and acid houses back, no one would have believed you. But it is.
Do you feel like the government is using the pandemic in a way as an excuse to kill off the sort of nightlife that it doesn't really like? And that can be evidenced in even just the Cultural Recovery Fund, where they've placed their money.
I don't think they needed the pandemic as an excuse. I mean, you've seen the amount of clubs that are being closed down, or the trouble that places like Fabric went into. They're dead set on squashing it however they can do it. You'd think that they'd have learned over the 30 years that it's not a bad thing. I mean, you look at places like Berlin, where the government actively, promote the clubbing scene, and this country, they just want to close it down.
And Holland as well. I think they're giving festivals a pot of money for those that might not come back. But they seem to be very keen, the government, to say, look, you can have these festivals. We want these festivals to happen, and they are genuinely money making. It goes towards the economy. I honestly can't understand it. Is it just because it's Tories being Tories?
It's the old Etonians. They don't like acid house, do they?
I thought Tony Colston-Hayter was one of those types, and he was one of the early organisers, wasn't he?
Yeah.
And what impact do you feel this time around that the We Are Viable campaign has had? And you probably have to be a bit careful with this answer because your partner is probably just sitting next to you. And
yeah, she's just over there.
Be careful, Mark.
Yeah. I mean, the campaign started as just a way to help the industry in any way possible. Originally, I think everyone was looking at the government to bail clubs, venues, whatever, artists out, but the government weren't interested in that at all. So there's been a change of tack over the year where it's now gone to proving that things are possible. The government basically want you to lay out a plan to show them that this is safe, that's safe. You can do this with this amount of numbers. The infections rate would be like 0, and just trying to show a roadmap back to some kind of club culture. But obviously, the government don't listen to what's.
I'm not having that. I mean,
shock horror.
And so, what are you doing? Not you, but the campaign. What is We Are Viable still doing? Because I know that there was when it launched, there was quite a sort of, particularly in the dance music social media, there was a lot of noise around it. We're quite some time on since that. What's still going on with the We Are Viable campaign?
Originally it was trying to get all the voices together rather than it be so splintered. There were so many different organizations starting up, all wanting to be heard, and it was like, rather than us all be shouting from different areas, let's all get together and try and have one kind of voice. They're working very closely with the NTIA at the moment, trying to find out ways.
What's the NTIA for those that don't know?
No, I'm going to be correct.
Oh, good luck.
Nighttime Industry
Association.
Yeah, there you go.
Right, okay, we got there eventually. Thank you, Mrs. Archer.
Cheers, mate. So they're working with them to try and there's been studies done in different countries showing that outdoor events, not of huge scale like Glastonbury, but outdoor events, the risk of infections because it's outdoor, and if as long as people are semi-socially distancing, the infection rates are very low, because the government have got it into their head straight away. When you're all close, this is going to happen, kind of thing, and you've got to try and prove to them, as well as because there's obvious risks to people's mental health throughout the year. So the We Are Viable campaign, they've also tried to get through a load of resources together on their website, Facebook pages, everything like that, for people who need help, who are suffering. They've also been working on a virtual. Go on.
Sorry, Mark. I was going to say, I mean, it must. You just cut out a little bit, so I'll ask you the next question. But it must feel at times I mean, I certainly feel it as somebody who thinks that the way we're doing these lockdowns is way over the top. And I'm a tiny voice that is crowded out by people being, as I see it, quite hysterical. But it must feel in the We Are Viable campaign, regardless of whether you believe the lockdowns are the right thing to do, etc., that you are pushing something of a large boulder uphill against this government.
Oh, yeah. Purely for the fact that, just as with Acid House, and they, demonise it, blah, blah, blah. The government have come out with very strict, right, this is how it is, and you're not allowed to do this. And trying to get them to listen or, offer them different ways, they'll shout it down. So it's got to be a constant thing where you keep proving to them that things are possible.
And how is it? Excuse me. How are We Are Viable being funded? Is there a way that people can donate if they would like to get involved?
There is a way. If you go onto the website, there is a way you can donate. I donated a portion of the profits to the new single that we got out, just to try and help, because they're all people who are from the industry, various places in the industry, all working, and they've been working very long days to try and help, and they're all doing this for nothing, but they do need help. So if there is anyone out there who can donate, it would be fantastic.
Yeah, it's the We Are Viable campaign. And you've been sort of through this once before, not a pandemic, but the government, as we say, trying to crack down on raves. And you've come out the other side of it before, and I've got no doubt you'll come out the other side of this one too.
Oh, yeah.
But when you do come out the other side of this, what impact do you think the past year and what we've seen will have both on the modern day rave scene and also modern day rave music?
I'd like to think that people would actually live in the moment a bit more when it all comes back again. I'm aware, there are cycles of behaviour where things happen, like people filming everything at the moment. And it's like you go to a rave and you see everyone filming, so you start doing it, and it just gets passed on because everyone thinks it's the norm. It'd be nice if once we kind of, everyone's like, sod filming it. Let's have a dance. And people go for it because you never thought that we weren't going to be able to do it.
Well, now people are going to be filming because they're like, look at what we've got now.
We're back, and it would be nice if there weren't so many phones up in the air, and everyone just really enjoyed it for what it is, and made the most of it.
And what about the music, do you think? Because, as I say, you've been through it before, and the music will have been impacted. But music is always impacted by external influences. So you've been through it before. You've seen those external influences and how they influenced the music in the 90s. What about now, do you think?
I mean, the way the club scene went, it fractured a lot. I don't know whether it's so fractured at the moment. I don't think it can fracture anymore. There's just going to be a lot of really feel good music about, and this is why I play the old school stuff, because there's not a lot of music around that's quite like it with such a euphoric nature. So hopefully I'll get a booking when it's all done.
Well, I hope that it goes back to I'd like to see mixed arenas. That's what I'd like to see. I think there was too much fracturing, and then therefore all the events are quite small, and there's never a coming together. I'd like to see a big coming together. Whether or not we do see that is another matter. We're going to be back very shortly with Mark Archer to rifle him on the Quickfire round, our famous Raw Quickfire round, to really get to know him.
X amount of pressure, X amount of raw.
This is Raw, the 90s Rave Podcast, with me, Tom Latcham, interviewing Mark Archer. We're going to try and find out a bit, Mark, about the man behind the mask, because I know you've done lots of interviews, but not those interviews often ask just about the music rather than a bit about yourself. So I'm interested to know a bit more about you. Right. I mean, we know your real name, although do you have any middle names? No,
I was... They were toying with the idea of either calling me Aaron or Anthony as a middle name, but my brother didn't have a middle name, so then my dad decided against it.
Okay. What's your age? How old are you?
52. Nearly 53.
Nearly 53. When's your birthday?
July. I'll say nearly.
Okay, well no, that's not nearly. I mean, that feels like a really long way away. And where are you originally from?
A little place near Wolverhampton called Bishopswood. It was a hamlet. It wasn't even a village. It was that tiny. But
Okay.
moved to Stafford when I was about 10, or around Stafford, and been there ever since until about 2011.
Oh, where do you live now?
Redditch.
Okay. Is that far? I don't know. I don't know that Midlands area that well.
Just south of Birmingham.
Okay, fine. And what's your relationship status? I mean, I know the answer to this because we're going to come on to it at a later point, because you got married at Bangface, which is
I did,
which
yes.
is amazing, but also slightly mental. So your relationship status, you are married.
Yeah, I am. Yeah, fully married.
Very good. And do you have any children? And if so, how old are they?
I have 3 children myself, and Nikki has 2 children. So Christmases are quite fun times. I have 3 children. Harry, Liam, and Emma. Emma's 26, Liam's 23, and he'll be 21 in a couple of weeks.
Well remembered. And well, I'm going to I'll ask you a bit about your kids later, and I'm interested not about your kids necessarily, but the relationship with them and how it was impacted on the fact that you were constantly traveling, doing these gigs at the weekends and that sort of stuff. We'll come to that later. What is your favorite? What sort of music do you like? You really like, except rave music?
I try not to play rave stuff at home, so that I don't. Yeah, so I don't, because I mean, at the moment, obviously, it's different, but. With me playing it every weekend, I didn't ever want to get to a point where I've overheard something, keep playing it, so every Saturday it'd be a bit, kind of fresh again. So I listen to, after 30
I mean, that's
years,
the problem with old school, isn't it, really?
But I listen to a lot of like early electro, the Street Sounds compilations, 80s soul and funk, stuff like that, but also a lot of the new the new breakbeat stuff, where people are doing like the early jungle, or the 92, 91 breakbeat kind of sound. So that I'm into a lot of that.
Yeah, okay. And what's your tipple of choice?
Gin, really. Any kind of gin, to be honest.
Straight?
No.
No, you've got to have a mix. Okay, fine. Not straight out of the bottle.
That has happened. It's not a good look.
It's happened to us all. And what's your favourite movie?
It's probably Beat Street, and closely followed by Star Wars. And, the Star Wars trilogy.
You're a bit of a sci-fi sort of type.
Just really Star Wars. Never got into Star Trek, really.
Okay. And do you have any secret hobbies?
When I was a kid, I was a keen bird watcher. There's a blackbird just there. That's why I stopped. A keen bird watcher. So it's always
a junior twitcher.
Yeah, lots of junior now. So I'm always into birds. Yeah.
Oh, really? Did you? Yeah. So how did you get into that?
I think I got bought a bird book when I was little, and just obviously read it a lot. My dad used to pick up on things that he noticed you liked something, and would encourage it without really pushing it. And he bought me a pair of binoculars, and where we used to live in this little hamlet, you wouldn't do it these days, but I'd like walk, 2-3 miles and go and lie in a field and watch lapwings, and I was only, 8 or 9.
Did you join the RSPB?
Yes, I did.
You were a junior twitcher.
I was, yeah.
I've got a mate of mine. I've got a mate of mine who used to be a junior twitcher, and I do like reminding him of that fact. And you still have a keen interest in birds?
Oh yeah. I mean, there's a lake near us, and there's cormorants there, and there's been I think it's a little egret has been spotted there this week. So we pop down there and go and have a look. Yeah.
Oh, to be fair, during lockdown, there's not a lot to do, but the one thing that hasn't changed is the number of birds. And actually, during that last lockdown, I bet you had a fantastic time bird watching, because there was no planes in the sky, and actually it felt like nature came back a bit, didn't it?
Yeah, I mean we've had, while the weather was great at the beginning of last year when lockdown first started, we had like a massive flock of seagulls on the estates where we live, and they're not normally here. So we were putting like food up on top of the shed for them to come. Didn't realise that the next door neighbour absolutely hated seagulls.
Well, I bet you're popular with the next door neighbours.
Yeah,
And do you have a sporting hero? Are you into sport?
I've never really been much of a sporty person, but I guess people like, Muhammad Ali were big heroes, when I was a kid.
Okay. And what's the best thing about you? And I suppose that's it could be a question for Mrs. Archer.
What's the best thing about me? I'm apparently a nice bloke.
I think that's probably fair.
Allegedly. I've been told it a few times.
Okay, that's good. And what's your worst trait?
Again,
might be one for Mrs. Archer.
Yeah. Years ago, I used to have a proper temper on me. But it's something you can blame on your parents, if they have it too. I mean, my dad used to have an awful temper, but it's something where you can either blame them and carry on, or decide to change. And I decided to stop being angry.
Good for you. And to be honest, the older one gets, generally the less angry you would hope you would get, because it's not a great look to be an angry old man, is it?
There's a difference between angry and grumpy there.
That's true. You've got the grumpy down, but you're just not angry anymore.
Yeah, grumpy's my thing.
Fantastic. Well, that's a little bit more about Mark Archer that you've got to know for the, if you didn't know. I mean, who would have guessed that the man behind the mask was a bird watcher? But there you go. He's a bird watcher. We're going to find out more about him very shortly here on Raw as we go into his early life and raving.
X amount of pressure, X amount of raw.
So, Mark, let's go back to the beginning, because we've talked about the We Are Viable and how you've been through so many changes to the rave scene and the parallels with the rave scene before and to now. But let's go right back to the start. And actually, I mean, this isn't really going back to the start. It's more about you as a person. But can you describe yourself in 5 words?
Describe myself in 5 words. Bald. That's a good one. Shy, which is something that a lot of people don't think
Really?
I am. Yeah. Not confident at all.
Really?
And it's with what I do, people would expect it. But sensitive. Yeah, the wife's nodding.
Okay. Well, they're all nice qualities. They're all good qualities.
Yeah.
And the being shy is something I'm going to come back to in a bit, because I wonder whether that made the mask and quite useful.
It helped. It helped.
Okay. What got you into rave music in the first place? Was there a first tune that inspired you to get into rave music? Did someone give you a tape? What was it?
I think because of my age, I was there into the breakdancing thing, the soul. And when house, first started, hearing house tunes played in amongst all the soul and electro and stuff. So it was a bit of a natural progression, really. So it was, you just kind of got into things as they evolved. So, I was into the early house, then the acid house. And then when people from different countries started making stuff, like the Belgian new beat and stuff, and then the Belgian techno and like people like Frankie Bones, adding breakbeats and stabs and all the rest, and it just how it all evolved. I just kind of followed it all the way through.
Were you from a musical family? Do you view yourself as musical?
I put together tunes. If that's the, I don't class myself as musical. I can do a rough tune, but that's about, I'm not like classically trained or anything like a lot. I wish I was. It would have helped a lot.
Yes, indeed.
But my dad was a singer in a local band, playing like cabaret and jazz clubs and, working men's clubs, that kind of thing. He was the lead vocalist and the conga player as well. And he was a family friend that we called an uncle who lived across the road, and he was the drummer. So he he gave us like a snare drum, like a cymbal stand with different cymbals and stuff like that. So we'd always have stuff like knocking about, like a pair of congas and a pair of bongos. So we were always tatting about with stuff like that when we were kids. But it was, I think it was just a genuine interest of wanting to know how they did certain things on electro records. I never even imagined that I was going to start making music. It was just like, I wonder how they do that. And then I bought a small sampler from Dixon's, and just to...
I would say I could be probably quite bold in saying that was probably the best purchase of your life.
Yes, yeah.
How much was it?
I mean, my dad actually paid for it, and I had to pay him back because I was on the YTS scheme, and you're only earning what, like 15 quid a week. So he bought it, and I just gave him like 5 or 10 or. But I think it was around like 100 quid. So it seemed like a massive purchase at the time. But it was that, the fact that someone knew that I had that got like me and Dean working together. So if it wasn't for that keyboard, I don't think it would have ever, Altern, Bizarre Inc., none of it would have happened.
But it does just show you, doesn't it? Because you talk about your dad help sort of inspiring you to become into birds, but not pushing it too heavily. And again, he obviously saw that you had a desire for music or to create music, and he went out and did that. And there's a lesson there, isn't there, in parenting, which is to don't be too heavy, just sort of G along your kids' passions, and they will find their groove.
But he did actually give me like the biggest ultimatum when I'd been doing the music for a bit, and it kind of like stopped, and there was a job in the village going as a butcher, and he said, like, right, you're trying the music and you're not making any money out of it, or there's a guaranteed job there as a butcher. They'll always need butchers, so but he said, this is your choice, because if you go and be a butcher, you'll always think, what if? And he said, it's totally your choice, and I chose the music.
Wow.
Maybe
was it the right choice?
Maybe not. Who knows? What if?
And what was your first rave then? Because you were obviously into the rave music, but you were quite young at the time, being on the YTS. When did you go to your first rave? What was it? Can you describe the feelings and what drew you in?
I was going to, like, the usual kind of ritzy kind of club on a Saturday from when I was like 17, but a club opened from going to those kind of things where you had to wear like shirt and tie and shoes and trousers, and then a club opened in Stoke called Frenzy, and I think it was on a Tuesday night, and all they played was acid house, and you went into this venue, and the club bit was downstairs. So it was like a pub upstairs, and you all sat there, and everyone got like their smiley t-shirts on and bandanas and stuff. I mean, I wore like a pair of jeans, and I'd gone to HMV and bought a smiley t-shirt. It was a really crap one, but it was just, I had to wear something that you thought was right. And went downstairs, and it was just drapes. Everywhere was black. There was a strobe, a UV, and loads of smoke, to the point where if you put your hand there, you couldn't see your hand. It was just, but the difference between what I'd been going to on a Friday and Saturday, going to a pub first, then going to like Top of the World or Ritzy or whatever, and listening to a bit of chant music, and then go downstairs and listen to a bit of soul or whatever. To that, it was just like totally different worlds, and it just absolutely blew your head.
And how then did you develop into a full-on raver? I mean, we can talk about your music separately, but you got big into raves. I've heard interviews in the past with you before where you talk about going to Shelley's whenever you weren't performing. Yeah. So you obviously were bang into being a raver.
Yeah.
How did that then develop from that first event into going out all the time?
Well, I caught the bug with the frenzy thing. So we'd go there like every single week, and then that like I said earlier, that closed, and then another one opened close by. So we went to like various like acid things, and then the following year the music opened up slightly. I mean, we were still going to the weird Saturday night thing, but now we were wearing, you know, like flowery shirts and little waistcoats and stuff, doing the acid dance. And everyone I mean, we cleared the floor. There was like 4 of us. And we went there and started doing the dance, and no one in Stafford had seen it. And everyone left the dance floor just thinking, what are these weirdos doing? But it was like like with the music, you just went to like different venues. There was one in Stoke, a night called Introspective. And I mean, we even played there as Nexus 21 in 1990. And all like the bleepy stuff and like stuff from America, and like Frank DeWolf tracks being played there. And then there was the raves at the Birmingham Rag Market, and they were originally called Time Out, but the magazine stopped them using the name because they used the name and the logo. So they changed their name to Time. So it was like a progression through the different styles of music in clubs, and then when the raves started, going to those. So there was no, I think, you know, Frenzy was like the first ever thing like that I ever went to.
And many rave artists, I've been shocked by this actually. Many rave artists say that they don't really do drugs. I'm interested. And I ask everyone that we interview, what about you?
I didn't have a clue what who was or who, yeah. I mean, people have said like Space from Asterix in Space. He used to say to me, how can you make tunes like that with little bits in your tunes that like people who are off their nut, that's my bit. He's like, you're making tunes with those bits in. He's like, how can you do it? We played, I think it was a Perception. And I'd got a red Cavalier Estate at the time. It's like the second car, and we needed an estate car to put like the big alternate keyboard fronts in the back. And I got like Asterix in Space and a couple of mates from Sheffield with me, and we're all sat in the car around the back of the stage, and everyone got out to go back into the crowd, and someone said, "Oh, I've left this here for you." And there was like half a pill on the back seat, and I was just too scared, because in my musical career, I'm very lucky. I've been at the right place at the right time. Loads of things have really like just pure luck, but day to day, I'm pretty unlucky. Where, you know, you've got no money, and then washing machine will break down, or your car will break down, and you're just like, oh, why is this always happening to me? And I just thought, I'm going to be one of those people who takes a pill, and it's going to be the whole Lear Betts thing. And I'm just, you know, I was enjoying it that much. Like, I'd be there before the club opened. I'd be one of the last people dancing at a rave, you know, at 6 a.m. When people were like gurning the tits off, I'd think that was them doing their bass face. So I'd be there like screwing my face up, thinking that's what they were doing. And I'd not taken a thing. You know, I was so naive about the whole thing, because I didn't know who was off their nut or who wasn't.
It was interesting then. So you didn't do drugs, and so you were creating music for people on drugs without being actually on drugs. Was that just an accident then, that you made them so good for people on drugs, or did you ask people? I don't know. Like it seems incongruous.
Just an accident, I think, because I was so into the music. Obviously, other tunes may have been made by people who were doing stuff, and it's like you kind of knew, you know, certain bits that you needed, but I didn't know what it'd do to you, you know, if you were off your nut. It's just a happy accident, I guess.
Okay. And how does a young bloke growing up in rural Staffordshire start? Oh, I know you moved to Stafford, but you know, you started off in a hamlet. How does a young bloke from there go to, you know, start creating music and then become eventually part of one of 90s rave's biggest acts? Accidentally, I think you're going to say.
It was, honestly. I bought that little the little sampler, and I knew Dean Meredith from the breakdancing days, I used to ride in from Nexus, which is a village outside Stafford, ride into Stafford to watch the guys break dance, and eventually, followed them around, knew them, kind of thing, did a bit of body popping and what have you. And then a few years later, I've been doing the painting and decorating, and the firm didn't have enough work. So it was a kind of like last in, first out situation. So I'd gone into work in the morning. They'd said, we've got no work, you're out of a job. So walked back into town to go and catch the bus home. As I walked past the co-op, there's Dean in the window. And he was a couple of years younger than me. And I was like, stood there laughing at him because he was all like got shirt and tie on and everything. And he was doing his school work experience. And he said, like, come in. Went in. He said, oh, I've moved house now. I'm living out in Brockton, another village just outside Stafford. I've got like my turntable set up. Bring your keyboard with you, and we'll just do some jamming. So I've still actually got the tape, and it's horrendous of the stuff that we did. But he used to like get 2 copies of a drum beat, mix that together. I play like a bass line or some pads or a vocal sample over the top, and then we get that cassette, play it through his setup again, and he does some scratching over the top and just make some rough demos. And there was a local newspaper called the Staffordshire Newsletter, and it said that a recording studio had opened up, and they were making a big fuss of this band who did like Duran Duran and Simple Minds covers. But we thought, we'll go up there with this cassette. Took the cassette there, and the bloke signed us up there and then.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So, and then how did that then progress to what we saw with you later on? And you Bizarre Inc. You went Nexus 21, and then also Top of the Pops ultimately with Alternate. What happens then? Did they help sort that out? Was that the studio or
the first instance was he gave us a lot of studio time.
Right.
What we didn't realise was we weren't going to get paid for anything that we ever did. But we eventually, myself and Dean, worked up to. There was already an engineer when we first started going there, and he showed us how to use all the gear there. And then he left, so we ended up being the engineers at the studio. But there wasn't many clients coming into the studio, so we just spend all day, like put a cassette in, put like a high pitched voice on a microphone, and just sit there and witter, and just do like full C90s full of us talking rubbish. So we wasted like a hell of a lot of time, but in between times we like make tracks. We started off as Rhythm Mode D because the bloke wanted us to do more kind of like bomb the bass style music, sample scratching. So we did Rhythm Mode D. We did some breakbeat albums, and eventually allowed us to do an acid house album, which we wanted to do when we first started there. So we waited, like at least 6 months before he allowed us to do that. And then we wanted to do a techno album after that. So we called ourselves Bizarre Inc. because we used to go around saying, oh, no way, that's bizarre. So it was just, we call ourselves Bizarre and put like a little ink or whatever on the end of it. And we did an album, and the album was quite like techno-y, but we did a 12-inch where the one side was like a hip house track called It's Time to Get Funky. And the other one was technological. One of the techno-y things, and it got to number 100 in the charts, which was like the first thing that we'd ever seen our music get anywhere. And Dean decided he wanted to go solo, but rather than say I want to go solo, he got me the sack for my job as an engineer.
Oh,
yeah.
How did you feel about
that? Well, I thought he was a mate, but obviously not. He didn't seem to think that it was such a big deal.
Well, he fucking wouldn't, would he?
Yeah.
He hasn't lost his job.
Yeah, it's all right. You can go and get another one.
Oh dear.
So I was on the dole for a bit.
Right.
So by which time, Andy, who later joined Bizarring, he'd started working there. He'd got a mate called Chris. So the two of them, they actually could play keyboards, whereas me and Dean couldn't. So we were making tracks and asking them, oh, can you play these chords on there? So I was on the dole for a bit, and then I phoned up the studio again and said, look, I've been listening to a lot of like Detroit techno. I want to do like a techno project. And he said, oh, you'll have to work with someone. I mean, he was very bitter for a bit. They didn't want me back at the studio. But I don't know whether he changed his mind and thought, what I was doing originally was he might sell something. So he allowed me back to the studio and said, you're going to have to work with Chris. And I didn't want to, but I couldn't play keyboards and he could. So, and that's
convenience.
That's how Nexus 21 started.
Well, we hope you're enjoying today's episode of Raw, but now's where we ask you inevitably for your help to keep this project rolling on. We're a tight-knit team of 4 working part-time for free, taking no wages out of this project to create this podcast, and it's quite a serious undertaking alongside our normal day jobs. Hopefully you can see from our progression from audio to video in the few months since we started this podcast that, thanks to your ongoing donations, we've managed to improve our equipment. And I'm pleased to say your generosity means this podcast now washes its own face in terms of costs, which is absolutely great news. And thank you so much to any of you who've donated. We've got big plans for the future, but we aren't going to be able to do it without your support. So if you want us to keep making Raw, you're going to need to keep on funding Raw, and that will help with the cost of renting or buying recording kit and paying expenses to travel the country and interview more of your favourite rave artists from the 90s. So if you can spare anything at all, no matter how big or how small, you can do so at gofundme.com/the 90s Rave Podcast. That URL again is gofundme.com/the 90s Rave Podcast. And if you're not in a position to donate, because we know it's a tough time for everybody, you can instead help by subscribing and sharing our content on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram and Twitter. You just need to search for Raw, the 90s Rave Podcast. Go and do that now, please. Massive love and respect to each and every one of you. Hope you're enjoying it. Did you have any idea at any point what you, like a defined idea or even any idea actually of what you wanted to be, or a strategy to get on or find success, become a chart act, anything? Or was it just all...
No, it's all pure, just winging it. The whole
you say
thing.
you're unlucky, but actually that's quite lucky. If you were weighing up lucky versus unlucky, that's pretty lucky. I mean, that's... In
my career, things happen. They're just right place, right time.
Why do you think that is? Because that it can't all be accidental. It can't be. I don't believe it. There must be something you did or you were doing that put you in a place where you were. I don't know. It can't all just be a total.
Honestly, no idea why. It's whether it balances out the bad karma that I get in normal life. It's like, actually we'll give this kid a break here. Yeah.
And how was your music inspired by where you came from? Because what is or was the Midland sound in your eyes?
It's weird because you didn't think that there was a sound, because like Sheffield and Leeds and Bradford, that had like the bleep thing, and I think because there was like Nottingham who kind of like with Rhythmatic, they did the bleepy stuff as well. I mean, I was bang into like the Detroit techno. And we did the first album where it was just, I want to sound like Derrick, Kevin and Juan. That was how I wanted to do it. But then as it progressed past that, that was on Blue Chip, and then Blue Chip folded, and another chance meeting in a nightclub. The boss of Network Records, and he says, "Oh yeah, I've got your album. Yeah, come and have a meeting with us." And we signed to Network, and then they'd got a release schedule kind of already built, and they started playing like, you know, the rhythmatic stuff, and so it kind of, what was being played kind of had a massive influence on the way we did things. We still wanted to sound like Detroity, but incorporate the bleepy things. So then we came out with Self-Hypnosis, which everyone said sounded like an ice cream van.
So did you sort of create the Midland sound then, rather than reflecting the Midland sound?
I just think it was a big melting pot, because there wasn't any, you know, like Acid came from Chicago, and then the UK took it on, and everyone did their version of Acid. I think we were just, you know, there were other artists in Birmingham, but because there was no internet and no social media, you just didn't know who was making tunes, where they were coming from. So you're just going out listening to what was being played. So I guess the places that I went to and the music that they were playing had a massive influence. Like Neil Macy, for instance, I met him in a little club called Number Sevens. It was a little wine bar, like mirrors on the walls and stuff, glass shelves behind the bar, and proper little tiny place. But around like 1990, late 89, early 1990, he was the person I was going to every week listening. So he really shaped what I was listening to. And I always used to take a copy of the first Nexus 21 12-inch to any club that I went to and give it the DJ. And I went up to the DJ booth and he pulled it out of his record box. I was like, oh my God, someone's actually bought my record. And
I mean, I think we're finding how you found your fortune. It seems you're going to clubs all the time and talking to people and meeting people and giving them your stuff. I mean, that's probably the answer, isn't it? Rather than an accident.
And it was quite difficult because of being shy, but it's after going there like every week. I mean, it took me weeks to work up to take a copy. It wasn't like the first week I'll just bowl in there. You know, it was like go and stand by the DJ box a lot. You know, nod to the DJ, do that for a few weeks, and then I'm like, oh, I've made a record, mate. Yeah. But the 1 week he said he was thinking of packing it all in, and then the next week he said, oh, I've got a job. The people who run Cool Cat Records from Birmingham, and I knew the label. You know, they put a lot. The ones basically that brought Detroit techno to the UK. They've got like a lot of the Chicago stuff on there as well. He said, oh, the boss is over there. I've just got a job as an A&R man. They're starting up a new label called Network. Go and have a word. I was like, there's no way I can go over and have a word with the record label boss. And so I went and stood there, and he was having a conversation. And I stood there like a plank for like 10 minutes waiting for them to stop talking. And he just turned to me, you all right? Oh, yeah, I'm Mark from Nexus 21. And luckily, he'd heard of us, and it got the conversation going.
Okay. It must have been quite an exciting period. I know you did like quite an early collaboration with Man Paris, who was one of the leading early Midlands MCs, but there will have been loads of people that you could have collaborated at that time. It must have been incredibly exciting at that age, the potential for so many interesting collaborations. I
mean, we'd not long signed to Network. I mean, this was like, say, January 1990. And I think it was like March, they sent us out to Detroit to work with Derrick, Kevin and Juan in Kevin's studio and record some tracks over there. You know, they said, do some basics yourself, take your discs over with you, your sample discs, and we'll work on the tracks, because they knew we wanted to sound like Detroit artists. So they got like Mark Kinchin in the studio to do like the percussion on the track, so we sounded authentic. Those tracks actually came out last year for the first time. They've sat on DAT since 1990.
Wow!
So they were only released last year, but we came away with tracks sounding like we're actually from Detroit. You know,
Wow,
it was amazing. But being in the studio with like Antonishka, Kevin Saunderson, Juan Atkins, Derrick May, you know, going to like American football games with them all, it's just absolutely mind blowing.
What were they all like?
Absolutely sound. But I was, because they were already like my musical heroes. So I was just absolutely gobsmacked for the entire week we were out there. Like, didn't know what, couldn't believe, you know, what was going on. Like we'd work in the studio for a day and then go to Kevin's apartment and he'd be there with his family. And he got like, it's like one of those soft dance mat kind of things plugged into his Nintendo. And we're playing like some Olympic running thing. And I'm standing there doing this on this dance mat thing, running next to Kevin Saunders, thinking, "Oh my god, oh my god, oh my god!" Just couldn't believe what was going on.
Did they not think, "Who's this kid who's barely speaking, just looking at us like some sort of hero?" Like,
but because of the connection with Neil Rushton, who ran, you know, Cool Cat and Network. He'd been going over there originally to find like Northern Soul releases, you know, going people's garages and buying like boxes of unheard of tunes. And someone said, "Oh, you want to hear this kind of music? This is what's going on now," and got him into the whole techno thing. And he met Kevin, Derrick, and Juan, and Carl Craig, and Eddie Fowlkes, and apparently one of our tunes got played at the Music Institute, which was a big club in Detroit, and it was Real Love, which was the reason that Nexus 21 started. Because I'd sampled the entire bass line off a Derrick May track. And Derrick May heard it and was going to break our kneecaps, and until Neil said, "No, it's cool. We've signed them. You know, they're cool. They're doing it out of respect. They love your work."
Amazing. Well, in fact, look, it would be remiss of me not to ask this question about Derrick May, because you were very close to him. He later suggested that you write the book, which you ended up doing. So you obviously have had a relationship with him over a long period of time. And Ian S., one of our listeners, because we always put out our questions to our listeners on our social media accounts, by the way, if you want to head there, do please. We're on all of the social medias. Ian S. asked, with all the allegations around Derrick May, how did you find him, and did you see anything remiss around Derrick May's behaviour? Of course, he's been accused of sexual assault by several women.
Yeah. I mean, aside from all those, when I went there, obviously he was a musical hero, listening to his stuff, and then being there, and he's a larger-than-life character. But we went into, I think it was Juan's studio, and they got like two sets of A-frames and a mixing desk to the one side and all the effects and all the keyboards and stuff the other side. And they were using this MMT8 sequencer. And he got a swivel chair and he was going between like the effects and turning up faders and pressing buttons, this, that, and the other. And we were listening to this tune. I was just stood there like, watching him. Just, oh my God, how is he doing this? And then a few months later, I got sent some promos by Network, and it was one of the things that they were putting out, and it was a track, Fade to Black, in sync. And there's a reprise version on the B-side. Derrick's not credited at all. And it was that track that I'd watched him do. So as soon as it came on, like hairs, what hairs were left, all up on the back of my neck, and just, oh my God, it's that tune, you know. And it's absolute mesmerizing to watch, you know. So he can knock out a tune, definitely.
Yeah. And in terms of his behaviour since all these allegations, is that disappointing to you? Because he's your hero.
Yeah. If they are true, and it's you don't want to belittle the allegations. If someone's made the allegation and it is true, musicians are normal people. You know, there's good uns and there's bad uns. You know, everyone's got skeletons in the closet. Some skeletons are bigger than others. very disappointing and upsetting. And like a lot of people, Afrika Bambaataa, Michael Jackson, etc., it detracts from their music.
Yeah,
and you don't know what to do for the best.
No,
do I stop listening to it? It's a difficult.
X amount of pressure, X amount of raw.
I want to talk to you a little bit about your live performances, because we've talked about you in the studio. What was your first proper rave booking as a rave act? And given how shy you are and not extroverted that you are, how did you find it?
The first live gig that we ever did, there was a night that I used to go on a Wednesday night in a club called the Dome in Birmingham. And that's where I first met Man Paris. A lot of the Birmingham DJs played there. It's where I heard a lot of the tracks from like 1990 played out for the first time. And we were offered a live gig, and we'd never even thought about doing any music live. So we had to cobble together a live set. They put us on this stage, projected. They had there's the doorbell. The wife even said this was going to happen.
That's all right. It happens. That's life goes on, mate.
Yeah. I hope it's a record. They filmed us and projected us behind us on a big screen.
Right.
And it was me and Chris. Chris had an Ensoniq SQ80, and that had like an onboard sequencer. It was the keyboard that Adamski used. So it had an onboard sequencer. So you had like your bass line, then your bass line with strings, and then like a noodly bit. So you could go through your different patterns. And then I'd have a 909 that I bought in Detroit with like a drum pattern for each track. And then turn the instruments up, turn the kick up, turn the snares up, turn the hi-hats up. So we were basically doing what Adamski was doing on his own, but it was two of us.
Right.
And our first PA was me and Chris looking down, just doing that, occasionally looking at each other, and that was it. And my girlfriend at the time said, "Oh, they projected you being really boring on a screen behind you." So just us looking down at a keyboard. So that kind of it made us want to perfect the live set a bit more and not be so boring. And we did the Nexus 21 PAs for there was like a big overlap where we were doing them in late 1990, early 91, right up until I'd say the summer of 91, by which time the alternate ones had taken over. But I didn't want alternate to be boring. I wanted it to be something completely different to Nexus 21, so people didn't think we were the same. So with Alternate, I got all the tracks together for our first PA as Alternate. Got all the tracks together, put them on like a 1/4-inch tape machine, edited them so it went straight from one track to another in time. Got like a half an hour PA, recorded it onto DAT, and we just played the DAT and karate chop the keyboards.
Brilliant.
Just to be, like, so that people didn't think we were the same people.
But is it difficult to do a genuine live PA and be exciting too? Because you are concentrating so hard on all of the buttons and the keyboards and whatnot and the sampling machines, etc., etc. I mean, I've never done it, but it looks incredibly complex. Yeah. But is it hard to do something so complex and be exciting too live? Yeah,
totally. I mean, when you look at like the big PAs that are actually, playing live, like Orbital or Chemical Brothers, a lot of it is the lasers and the visuals and everything, because two blokes behind a bunch of keyboards isn't an exciting watch. The whole phase of loads of people playing PAs off their laptops, it just looks like someone reading emails. There was no charisma to them. So
that then we'll come to Prodigy later, but that's why you have to have other stuff while you do, while Liam, for instance, does his boring stuff behind the keyboard. That's why you would have those, the dancers and all that sort of stuff. Well, John Lunnan asks, when he first set up his live PA, how hard was it to learn to use all the drum machines and synths? Because there weren't any tutorials back then. I mean, to me, it all just looks like a massive pain in the arse.
Yeah, it was. It was. I mean, when we went to Detroit, I really wanted a 909. It was the sound of techno. And Jay Denham said he'd got a mate who lived in Chicago who was selling one for $600, and I ain't got 600 quid. So I asked the record label, is there any way you'd be able to get it and I'd pay it back? And they bought this 909, and I sat up in the hotel room and pressed play on it, and it was full of. I thought it was going to be full of like techno drum patterns, and I was going really excited, and it was just full of like turn up the bass, hip house kind of patterns. And I was like, how on earth do I? And it just meant me sitting there pressing buttons. This does this and this does this. Just working out. I didn't get a manual with it, and it took me ages to learn how to work it. I work best when someone gets a piece of kit and shows me, and I can write it down in my own language how I get there.
Well, with these YouTube tutorials, my eyes just glaze over. So yeah. I can't think of any tutorial I've ever followed on YouTube. I think I think I tend to probably work similarly. It's like, right, come and actually show me what I need to do rather than on a screen. Loki Sutherland says, not sure he'll remember this, but my mate booked them to do a live PA in Leicester. He received and they didn't have a keyboard stand, and us looking around for something they can use, we came up with the genius idea of using an ironing board. So Alternate played their live PA on a couple of ironing boards. Do you remember that?
It's not one I'd forget. Standing there, and the thing was, right, we always said like there was we need keyboard stands to put the keyboards on. And at the time, I hadn't got a keyboard stand. So, can you get a keyboard stand? And we might be able to get. And I think they borrowed their nan's ironing board. And I said, well, I don't really want to stand behind an ironing board. Can you get just like a drape, any kind of dark coloured sheet just to drape over it? Yeah, no problem. Got there, no drape. So I'm on stage, like, and it was that height that was backbreaking, with the keyboards and stuff on top of an ironing board. I mean, I always not knowing what the drugs did to you. I always thought people are going to see this and think, well, a bunch of lemons, we're using an ironing board. Probably half the crowd didn't even know we were on stage, so I shouldn't have worried. But yeah, it's not one I forget.
Well, is that the strangest piece of equipment that you faked a live PA with?
Well, the ones that we used to use all the time. When we first started Rhythm OD, there was three of us. There was me, Dean, and a lad called Gareth Bunting, and he had this little keyboard called a Gen SX1000. And it looked ace, little keyboard, loads of knobs on it. And he said, I can't get it to make a noise at all. I said, I'll give you a £5 for it. He sold it me for a £5, used it on like a couple of acid things, sampled, got some sub bass out of it, sampled it, used it on one of the versions of Activate. But decided it would be great to use for the PAs. So we made these big keyboard stands out of wood. They were like lecterns, really. They're like folded out, and you put the keyboard on. It was one's a big A, one's a big 8, and we used to like karate chop the keyboards. And people had come up at the end. It's like, oh mate, that PA was amazing. What are those keyboards? They've got all the noises in. And one of us would be holding like the lead because it hadn't even got a plug like on the end of it. They weren't plugged in or nothing, but people like trying to remember these keyboards to go away and buy them.
That's amazing. And what do you think it was that stood you out from the 90s popular music scene, both with Nexus 21 and later with Alternate, and also the rave scene too, but just in general, was it the live performances or fake live performances?
I think with Nexus 21 it was because we were trying to be Detroit, which no one else from the UK was. A lot of people get influences and do their take on it. but I really wanted to sound as authentic Detroit as possible. I mean, the first album, I don't think it did, looking back at it, but a lot of people catalogue it in their collections with all their Detroit stuff. But with Alternate, I think the live performances, I mean, we were doing them like pretty much every weekend whenever we had, a single coming up, to promote the hell out of it. I mean, the image played a massive part. There's no doubt that's what stood us apart from everyone else.
Yeah, well, I know a lot of people will know this story, but it is worth exploring about how you came to get that image in the first place. The masks, of course, the radioactive suits, etc., etc. Tell those that don't know how you came to end up with that thing, which again, accidentally, was the thing that has made you stand out over the years.
Total accident again. We played at the Eclipse in Coventry as part of, there was a Warp Records and Network Records tour. So there was LFO, Nightmares on Wax, Rhythmatic and Nexus 21. And we played there, I think it was like February or March sometime. And then when Infiltrate was on promo and doing well in the clubs, someone at the Eclipse said, we want Alternate to do a PA. We hadn't thought of doing a PA at all. Alternate was like a proper side project where we'd recorded music, and it was just a way of getting it out under a different name. Nexus 21 was like, the thing that we were really concentrating on. And I didn't want, again, being naive, I thought we've played as Nexus 21, Chris stood there, me stood there, me with 2 drum machines, him with 2 keyboards. People are going to see it and go, wait a minute, I saw these the other month. So I thought what we need to do is like completely cover ourselves up where no one knows who we are. And my brother was in the RAF at the time. And I asked him, have you got any like camouflage netting or anything like that? He said, I've got these vacuum packed suits. Took 2 of those out. If you ever put a hoodie up and pull the cords, you look a proper plonker. So like, we need to cover the rest of the face up. What can do it? Dust mask, bosh. Because I was still mad into like the whole 88 acid thing with the day glow, and so I painted the like fluorescent, put an eye on it for Alternate. Yeah, there's like a pocket on the front where it's like a lift up flap. I was like, oh, I'll write Alternate on there. There's a patch on the arm where in warfare you'd put, it's like a chemical reaction thing, so it'd tell you when there's chemicals in the air, it changed colour. So it's just like a felt patch. So I put an 8 on there. So it's all just proper DIY bodge job. I mean, the Alternate on the front was done in Tipex with a highlighter pen.
Amazing.
There's photos because it started to crack. I put sellotape over the top to stop it cracking. Then you put it in the washing machine, it all came off, so we had to get it embroidered. But it was just done for this one PA because we didn't think there was going to be any more.
Well, what was the reaction at that PA to seeing this pretty revolutionary thing up on stage? I mean, it didn't sound that revolutionary when you talk about it was done in Tipex, but it was new and different. How did it go down?
Honestly, like compared to the Nexus 21 PAs where people knew the tunes, we'd play like a version of Self Hypnosis and people would recognise it and it'd go off. For a group where no one knew right from the get-go until we played Infiltrate, none of the tunes really. And it properly went off. I mean, we'd do this thing where you'd like point at people in the crowd and they'd be like, oh, me, and start going on. And people would think it was an invitation to get up on the stage. So we had a crowd invasion at the first gig to the point you probably couldn't see me and Chris at the back. We'd already got like about 4 of our mates from Sheffield, Space from Asterix and Space MCing, and a girl came on to mime the bit for Infiltrate. And then all these people that came up on stage. It's actually in the video for Infiltrate is the footage from the first gig at the Eclipse. and you'll see there's a bit, and it's like the projections, me and Chris, and then there's a girl with like a white hat on doing all the dancing, and she came up from the crowd thinking, we wanted her to be a part of the band. She came up, she was there for ages, and in there we was like, we're trying to do a PA here.
So I know that it was a side project, Alternate to Nexus 21, and actually you just wanted to try some other stuff out. But did that reaction to that first gig make you think, hang on, I think Alternate might be the one here?
Yeah, it was a weird one because Infiltrate was recorded on somebody else's remix budget. It wasn't right. We're going to do like a new single. We were doing a remix for someone. We got 4 hours left of the studio. We may as well make the most of the time that we're paying for. Put the track together. Sampled that bit off a cassette. I'd got it saved on a disc of the Asterix in Space bit at the beginning. Did the track. Actually met Asterix in Space on the Saturday, which was like spooky. But when Infiltrate was getting played in clubs off promo, you could see it going off. And it went like it was the second Alternate release. And the first one, did well purely on value for money because there was 8 tracks on a 12-inch. So you weren't just paying, £5 for one. You were getting 8 tracks that you could play. But then Infiltrate started doing well, and people, we'd turn up to do PAs, and you'd hear people singing the track. Is this you? And they're singing the lyric to it. So we knew it was kind of doing well. And then we started doing more and more and more PAs because when the track was doing well, people had then, the promoters had heard of the name, then they start booking you. So it was, kind of like a rolling situation where it just got bigger and bigger and bigger.
And how would you choose your samples, and especially ones from famous old songs, like is it Candy Stanton's? Stuff like that. I mean, if you'd have done that nowadays, you'd have got sued to high hell, right?
It was when I hear a tune and I like that breakbeat, or I like that stab noise or that bass sound or whatever. So I catalogued like loads of bits. I can remember hearing Pure by GTO. At that club in Birmingham, the Dome. And it got like a crowd at the beginning. And the track went on. And it's quite a fierce in-your-face tune. And that was the basis for Infiltrate, even though it was nothing like Infiltrate. I wanted something with a crowd noise, an acidy kind of sound, a breakbeat, some sub bass, just loads of influences from different things. And then when we got the track playing, I got this Acapellas Anonymous Volume 2. I was just flicking through the acapellas, just seeing what went. Got to the Candy Satin bit. Didn't even know it was Candy Satin. Didn't know it was the B-side for Young Hearts Run Free. It was just, that works.
And did you ever have any copyright issues? Because nowadays, when you've got algorithms hunting the internet for sample songs and then basically just slapping them with a copyright issue, you wouldn't have had that nowadays because there's no internet. So, did you ever get any copyright issues?
Oh yeah. I mean, there's somewhere where we paid upfront. Did deals with the people to make sure we've sampled this, kind of clear it. Kind of. I mean, Strings Alive. Was the biggest one. Yeah. We were really lucky on it, Infiltrate, because I used the chords. I replayed the chords for Pacific State in it, and then we supported 808 State at Brixton Academy. And gave a white label to their tour DJ. And we were up on the balcony. I was with the 808 State lads, and he played it, and the tune come on. I was like, I tapped them all on the shot. This is it. And then it got to the bit with Pacific State, and I forgot we did this. And they all just looked at me. was like, oh, sorry, but they were cool with it.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
That is embarrassing.
Yeah.
Good that they were cool with it. I mean, it would have been incredibly embarrassing if they said, "I fucking hate this. What have you done to my tune?"
Yeah.
And what about now? Like, how does the sampling situation then compare to now? And how does that impact on the way that you and others who are very heavily on samples create their music?
You've got to be very clever these days. But there is still that. I've seen it where people have sent a label a tune and they've wholesale nicked like a big chunk of somebody else's, and the label won't know that it's somebody else's. And they've sent me a tune saying, "What do you think this is going to be our next release?" And I'm like, "You have heard this, haven't you?" And play on the original, and that you're joking. Because I think whereas back then people were actually buying the record and sampling chunks off record, now things are floating about as, you know, like sample packs and WAVs on the internet, and you can get stuff and you won't have a clue where they're from. So you might assume that they're, you know, like original things where someone has played these chords and they're for anyone to sample. So you've got to really think about it more so now than you did back then.
Are people unrealistic nowadays when you ask them if you can sample tunes, or more unrealistic than they were perhaps in the past when you were doing it, in terms of the money that they were after for signing off those samples?
A lot of tunes are built around a sample. So if you didn't have that sample, then you wouldn't have made the tune, basically. So a lot of people will ask for, you know, like 100% of the publishing, as well as you know, a fee for clearing the sample, because you've worked everything around that sample. I mean, I get asked all the time, can you send me the stems for your tunes? I want to do a remix of your tunes. Like that. That's not how it works. No. but these days, that's how it, you know, anyone can get stems off the internet. Somehow they find like an acapella or whatever parts of your track. They'll do a remix and put it up on SoundCloud for people to download. And like, wait a minute, that's my record. You're just giving it away. And they don't seem, it's the same thing as the whole phone thing. People see it as that's how it is.
And what's the shittest remix of your music that you've ever heard?
There's too many. But on frequency just gets absolutely hammered remix wise, and some of them are horrendous.
Brilliant. Andrew Murphy asked, the Kiddie sample Top One Nice One Get Sorted on Activate.
Top one nice one get sorted. Top one nice one get sorted. Top one nice one get sorted.
Who was that? And also, what's she up to now?
That was Claire. And it does say MC Crazy Claire on the record. The record label did actually get a producer from America to pretend that they were MC Crazy Claire and do interviews at the time. Even though Claire was 3 years old at the time, she's the daughter of the record label boss. And he liked the whole Charlie thing. So it was like, let's do our like little take on Charlie having like that kid's voice in a track. And we were thinking, oh, this isn't going to work. Even when we'd done the samples, this isn't going to work. It wasn't until it got it like looping over that center part in the tune where we thought, actually, you know, this does work. But she's an extremely accomplished tattoo artist now.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Where's she from?
In the Midlands. I mean, we're all from the Midlands, but she's in her mid-30s now.
Right.
Yeah. How old does that make me feel?
Well, yes, indeed. I bet she still dines out on that. I would. And back to the costumes. It must have been incredibly hot performing in those. Have you found something more lightweight, or do you still sweat?
No, I'm not that clever. It was,
I mean, you think with all the PPE washing around the UK now, that actually you'd be able to find some that was a little bit more lightweight.
Yeah, it was because it was only made for that first PA. there wasn't a great deal of thought put into it as like, actually, we're going to get really warm in these suits. So we did think we were just going to be doing the 1 PA. We cut the charcoal out of the suits to make them slightly more lightweight. We've heard so many horror stories of people who didn't, and the charcoal came out all over their normal clothes if they wore them, or their mom put them in a washing machine and ruined a load of washing because the charcoal came out. But I had my original suit from, I think, 91 until 2015 when I bought a second suit and put the first one into retirement. But yeah, they are stupidly hot. No air conditioning in a lot of the old clubs. Even nowadays, you know, you ask people, can you get like a fan next to the DJ booth just to, oh, sorry, mate, couldn't get a fan. Oh.
But on the balance of probability, you know, the balance of success, it's probably a price worth paying overall.
Oh, totally. Yeah, not my cleverest idea, but probably my cleverest idea.
John Zaremba says, as someone who's lived in the US of A, I only know the mythology surrounding Alternate, and I'd like to know how much of that was really true. For example, did they fly overhead in a hot air balloon and drop cookies and biscuits laced with E onto a crowd from the sky?
The mythology bit was, it started off with John McCready, who's like the press guy for Network, and he saw us. We turned up at the building where Network was, called Stratford Place, in my Mini, and I pulled up in front of the building and I could see them all in the window, and I went forward and then I reversed and then I went and then kept doing this for about 15 minutes, and they all just stood really bemused, and they kind of realised what a pair of idiots we were. So they said, right, we can roll with this and make up some silly stories. They made loads of different little stories about, because there was a spate where people were having their air horns taken off them by bouncers. So they made like pocket ones. Disco biscuits were real biscuits for the hungry raver. It was just a way of, while you weren't in the public eye because you hadn't got a single out, it was a way of keeping you in magazines and the music papers. There's a little story about you before like your next single had come along. So they made some really elaborate ones, like the hot air balloon one, for instance. We did a piece with Select magazine, and the idea was we would go up in a hot air balloon, and we'd got some. I've been to Sainsbury's and bought some little Christmas puddings, and they'd made new like labels for them, and they were called Brand E, the Pornos, the Score, Robin Hood brand Christmas puddings, and we were going to throw them to people in Stafford. Someone, before we actually started it, said, wait a minute, that's going to turn into a projectile missile by the time it reaches the ground, and you're going to cave someone's skull in. So I thought maybe that's not a great idea. And the weather was too bad anyway, so we never made it off the trailer. You know, there's photos of us, and we're stood in the basket, which is on the trailer. The photographer's on the floor shooting up at us with the sky behind us. So it looks like we're in a hot air balloon. We're in the basket, but we're still on the trailer on the ground. And then we drove to Stafford and tried to give away Christmas puddings in the centre of Stafford. But if you ever have a geezer wearing a chemical warfare suit walk up to you with the Christmas pudding, it's not one of these. And all the housewives are like, no, sorry. And we couldn't give them away.
Brilliant. Was stuff like this, you know, like KLF, for instance, you know, burning the £1 million, whether or not that actually happened or not, I have no idea. But was it you and KLF and acts like that just trying to find a way to stand out in a crowded market?
We were, a lot of people said we were like the budget KLF, purely because we had like the mad ideas just like them, but they somehow had this massive budget. I mean, they bought a submarine. But don't know why you buy a submarine, and there's photos of them stood next to a submarine, but it was something that, you know, added to the mystery of the KLF, and we hired a tank for the Evaporate video. So we seem to do similar things for them, but just on a bit of a smaller budget. But it did all work to help keep your name about, which was the whole reason behind it.
Well, that's it from another episode of Raw. We hope you've enjoyed listening to it as much as we enjoyed making it. We're now on all video platforms, so if you're listening on audio, please do check out our YouTube page for this episode filmed, plus loads more besides. And you can also find us on Facebook, Insta and Twitter. Just search for Raw, the 90s Rave Podcast. Plus, if you can spare just a few quid to help us continue making more great 90s Rave content and hopefully keeping a smile on your face at a difficult time, you can do so at gofundme.com/the 90s Rave Podcast. All donations will be ploughed back into the podcast, including expenses to get around the country interviewing some of your rave favourites and also improving our equipment.
X amount of pressure, X amount of raw.